Welcome, everybody, to the Baseball Blueprint Podcast, your home for all things player development, where we highlight some of the best instructors in the game. Today, I am very happy to have Rembielak here. Meg, tell us about your current happenings and a little bit about yourself to get things going.
Sure. Yeah. So I played college ball at Appalachian State. I graduated 2012. Was a middle infielder, righty hitter, and a slapper. So for those baseball people don't know, I was hitting, standing in on the right side, and then doing what a softball player calls slapping on the left side, which I don't recommend because no one told me not to do both, but did both. And then after college, I just was doing lessons here and there. I was helping coach some travel teams. And then in 2020, I started a YouTube channel, MegRem Softball, where I wanted to just kind of throw everything out there, drills, how to play your position, all that stuff. Because in my opinion, I just felt like there wasn't a lot of softball information out there. There's a lot of baseball, not a lot of softball. So I did that just to kind of, I don't know, maybe make a couple extra bucks during COVID, and it took off, which was great. So after that, so 2021, I started traveling for clinics, and then fast forward to now, I travel the country, doing clinics for the youth. So last year I did over 100 clinics last year.
Wow, geez,
Yeah,
busy.
yeah, very.
That's awesome. So Meg, diving into your disciplines here, your specializations are kind of in the infield and hitting space, and you've done a lot of work in the outfield too. Could you give us some of the maybe more valuable focus points that you think translate between the baseball and softball world?
Yeah. So, and this is something where a lot of softball coaches, especially in the youth ages, a lot of dads are volunteering their time, and they maybe played baseball and they don't know if it translates to softball. So, and I fortunately grew up in a baseball family. My dad coached Division I for 25 years. My brother actually coaches now at a Division I school. So I have that baseball background, and it's actually very, very similar. The only difference, in my opinion, is softball's a lot faster. There's 60-foot bases. Obviously, baseball's 90 feet. So it's just honestly a lot quicker. So you don't get the luxury of field it, shuffle, throw. And then, obviously, which this is a little bit, we can get into this later, but softball has slapper. So someone who can run from home to first in between 2.7 seconds, 2.9 seconds, that factors in too. But yeah, it's just honestly a lot quicker in softball.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I'm lucky enough to have a sister in this space too, but watching the tempo of the game is quick. It's fast, but then the amount of post reception time to get the ball out, you just don't have it, right? So you don't see a lot
Right.
of those 4-step patterns like you mentioned. Do you feel like when you're looking at a softball player and comparing them to maybe like a maturing baseball player, that you see softball players working better from the ground?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And kind of going back to what you said about like the transfers part, like I don't really know, how baseball players really like train. I've never really trained with a baseball player, but transfers is something that is so very important in softball, and which I feel is not focused on enough because we're always focused on footwork, which obviously footwork is super, super important. But in my opinion, in softball, hands and transfers are just as important that as footwork. And obviously, I know that's important in baseball as well. But if you have, especially if you got a girl running down the line in 2.8 seconds, you cannot be messing around with that ball in your glove.
Well, and I think the unique thing about the softball space too, and you don't see this as much for the youth baseball space, but the immediate understanding for softball players, like you have to shade in, you have to shift on slappers, is super valuable. Like that changes your understanding of the internal clock, understanding like what the situation is in the game too. One of the things that's really difficult for even college guys starting out to understand is like the speed of the runner will impact your depth and your stakes. Is that something that maybe a maturing softball player that you guys really hammer and address?
Yeah, and that's kind of going back to the dads who are played baseball, don't know softball, because I get this a lot. They are teaching their girls, ball to your right. If let's say a shortstop, ball to your right, get in front of it. And I'm like, I'm telling you, that's great if a girl is running, I don't know, 3-4 down the line. But again, if you have someone running 3 seconds, which is like average 3-3, 3-2, If you go two steps to your right and try and get in front of it, which you probably have that luxury in baseball, that girl's going to be safe. So that's something I've been trying to, like, a small example like that, trying to kind of hone in to girls that baseball, you might see it, they can get in front of it. Softball, if you're going two steps you're right, and if it's an average speed runner, you gotta backhand that ball.
Yeah, and it's funny, like just from working from a presentation standpoint. Again, my background's with baseball, so it changes. The size of the ball has an impact of it, and so
Oh yeah.
when you go to work, even from a presentation standpoint, understanding that a lot of times that backhand is like a push through move. Oftentimes in
Hmm.
baseball, we soak that in. Like that's something that
Yes.
we're reaching for and soaking in. If you guys are making that play as a soak in play, like you're throwing that off your back foot. Is that
Right.
something that's really tough to kind of sculpt and like understand clockwise?
Yeah, and it's something too which you the because I'm working with a girl right now. She's at short, and we're right now we're kind of working on when to attack and when to get that long hop, and it's so nice in theory and softball to want to you want to create the space to get the long hop, but it's one of those where, again, if she's fast, you can create the long hop and field it, but then she's going to be safe. So it's one of those, like, it's really really tough, especially for like someone she's 14, or I think she just turned 14, but just trying to get her to understand that internal clock, but also playing the ball the right way, because you do want to get the favorable hops. But sometimes when you try and get the favorable hops, like the long hop, that girl's safe. So, but that's the beauty of softball, and that's kind of why I loved playing or slapping on the left side, because I was really good at getting the ball in play. And when I put that ball right in the 5-6 hole, I don't care what kind of defender you were, I'm safe. Because that's, unless third base cut it off. But if I can get that shortstop to go to her right just for a step, I'm safe.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny, like the field is smaller, right? And the throw across is smaller, but the value of having momentum behind the movement is almost greater than having momentum behind the movement in baseball, because you have that extended amount of time. And
Yeah,
oftentimes with baseball players, a lighter ball, you're able to get rid of it differently. Like that ball can
right.
take off differently. So that's something that I know you softball players will really understand, but that's something we can take to baseball too, because that allows us to be more consistent, more accurate with our throws.
Yeah, and when do baseball kids move? So they're on a softball field. I know in Little League, but what are like the dimensions? When do they move to like the bigger fields?
So it depends if they're in rec league or travel. Usually at 14, everyone's at a big field.
Okay.
And so
And
you get
that's
that weird contrast, right? Because you got some weird like kids who have really hit full maturity and they're giant, and then other kids who haven't touched it yet.
right.
So you get this
Yeah.
big contrast.
Yeah, and see, that's thankfully with softball, when you start at 8, or however they're starting at really young, but like let's say 8U, they're starting 8U. Thankfully, the field doesn't change,
Yeah.
and you're able to kind of keep the same fundamentals. Because I'm sure in baseball, when you go from small field to big field, you can't play the balls the same way that you do, 60 feet. So
Yeah. And I think even looking at the differences, because I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only thing in softball that varies is the pitching distance and then maybe the ball size. And
for you between the baseball, like the little league,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So softball, or so they're 40 feet depending, well, it goes up every age group. It's like 40 feet for pitching, and then the ball, and which is crazy too, which I know this is not important in this podcast,
That's fine.
but
Go.
the softball size for an 8-year-old, like, I mean, granted, so it's a 10-inch,
Yeah.
or sorry, 11-inch ball, and then it goes to 12-inch when you get to 12U. But the fact that, like, baseball, the kids are small, so it's a small ball. Softball, you have girls who are smaller, and then you have a big ball, which really screws up your throwing
I was
mechanics as
about
well.
to say, what do you see? What problems do you see happen from that bigger ball and the smaller frames?
A lot. I do think it's both the ball, and we just don't spend enough time on throwing
Yeah.
because practices are limited and you want to get through everything. But a lot of girls kind of overcompensate. One, it's heavier, it's bigger, so they don't have a good grip, and they're just kind of like shot putting everything.
Yeah.
Throwing is a big issue, unfortunately. Up in, like, not even just young kids. Like, I see it 14U, 16U, and I'm looking at their arm action. I'm like, you're gonna hurt yourself.
Yeah. And so touching on that arm action, and that plays a little bit into transfer too. When you guys are working like on a quicker two-step pattern or even throwing on the run, it's almost an imperative for a softball player to be able to drop slot.
Yes. And that's such a controversial. Every time I post something about just a lower arm slot, you shouldn't do that. You're going to hurt yourself. And granted, a lot of them are people who just don't know.
Mhm.
But and this is a good example. When I was, I think I was like, I don't know, maybe 15. My dad, baseball coach, hit me ground balls, and at short, I'm more of like 3-4,
Yeah.
3-4 slot like here. And he just kept being like, you don't bring it up a little bit, and he just, I guess he didn't realize, it's like, Dad, I'm a lot closer than a year guy in college, and I can get away with it. But also too, like, I'm using that slot a lot more around the infield, because again, the bases are a lot
Yeah.
closer. So a lot of my posts are, you use it too much or you shouldn't use it. So I'm trying to, again, when I go to my clinics, it's like, no, should you use it every time? No. For example, relays, backhands, anytime it's a far throw, you want to go over the top. But if it's a short to second, second to first, like, you can use that lower arm slot
Well,
on the run.
I wonder if that's a reflection of people not necessarily understanding the way the tempo and the foot patterns work when you have to get rid of the ball quicker. I think one of the best cues I've heard. I forget where I heard this, but somebody said throw it where you catch it when you got to get rid of it, right? So
Yeah.
being able to adjust that slot, and I think one of the best to ever do it was Sis Bates. Watching
Hmm.
her throw was just, it was beautiful. The
I know.
ball
Yeah.
was in constant motion. She's throwing really low, and she would come high, exactly how you mentioned.
Right.
Is there something where that's not a natural slot for a lot of people to
No.
drop slot? Is there something that you do drill wise or mechanic wise to address that?
Yeah, so it is awkward, and I say awkward. It's really tough for a girl to learn, or I say girl, an athlete to learn it, because it's so different. And so the biggest thing that I try and teach them is, because a lot of people say sidearm. I was like, well, it's like, well, when you get in trouble is when you're going here, and like your shoulders are staying, straight across, and your arms getting away from you. That's when you hurt yourself. So I'm always working on or talking about, keeping the tilt.
Yeah,
You're just tilted. So what I like to do is, I really like to go in steps. So I just have them start, and I call this my throwing position. I call it the U shape for my younger girls. But just from here, they do a little bit of a tilt, and then they throw from that position. Because I feel like when you it's like, okay, here's how you do it, now go. They're just kind of
yeah,
thrown all over the place. So yeah, I really just like to have them field it, pause, bring it up, pause, tilt, pause, and then throw from
love
there.
it. Break it down, part the whole teaching. Makes sense to me.
Right.
I love
Baby
it.
steps.
So one of the things that I've seen baseball players do is something called the flamingo drill. And so
Hmm.
they're standing on a foot and they create torso tilt and kind of get a sideways axis that way. Is there something different within the movement of throwing on the run in baseball and softball, or is that pretty similar?
Pretty similar. I don't find that there's any difference. I was actually doing, what was it? I was doing, I went to the field with my brother, and so balls that were coming in, I prefer, depending on the bounce, I prefer to go two hands on the inside of my glove foot.
Yeah,
I just feel like it's a quicker transfers that way. And he was talking that he teaches, because he's infield coach at Bowling Green, and he teaches for the most part going one hand. And I know it is preference, but I was like, okay, try two. And he's like, this feels so weird. And I was like, I don't know. That's something and I don't know if that's just him. But I love to go, depending on if it's a short hop, then I'll go one
yeah.
hand to kind of pick it and reach. But I like to go two hands because I need that quick transfer to get that ball out.
Well, and I think that's, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Like, being able to do both is valuable, right? And so if there's a play that you, again, if we have to come and get it sometimes, like you mentioned, even on a slapper where we do have to throw that mitt, like, it's much
Yeah.
more valuable to kind of get extension and pathing with that
Yes.
isolated
Yeah.
hand. But again, the transfer is quicker with the two hand kind of reception in, funnel in.
Yeah, and I kind of try and teach my girls too, and because I'm very much, I'll teach you what I do, and we will do both ways. Like, I'm very big on, you do what's comfortable for you, as long as you're doing it quickly.
Yeah,
Because I know there are some girls who prefer just to go one hand, but yeah, for me, I don't know why. I like the two if it's a good favorable hop.
I dig it. I dig it. And so, in your opinion, as a former, college softball standout and high level instructor, would you be preferring to play on dirt or turf?
Um, I would say dirt, because if you're playing on turf, that's one time out of however many games you play.
Yeah.
Now, turf, I love it because you get such great hops for the most part. Um, but it's just you don't in softball. Unfortunately, we don't get turf, so I'd rather stay consistent with dirt. Even though I will say some fields that we played on are absolute
Yeah.
garbage. Even in college at D1 level, I'm like, can we get a rake out here?
Yeah. Yeah. I dig it.
So in that sense, dirt. But yeah, no, I would say dirt.
Okay. All right. I
Just what
dig
I'm
it.
used
And I know my sister's a slapper too. She prefers dirt because she feels like it can grip a little bit more spin when she soft
to. Yes,
slaps, and then no, when she's on turf, she hard slaps and she tries to chop, create a
right.
little bit
Yeah,
more air. But I
I
dig it.
love
I
that.
dig it. So diving in a little bit into pocket presentation, because I've seen you do some work on this with a flat mitt. I've seen you do isolated handwork. Are there any other tools that you like to use from a glove standpoint that kind of assist in that instruction?
Yeah, so I love to use my Valley Flat Glove, which I see your hat there. I love to use my Valley Flat Glove, and then I love my trainer with them. So I use my go to is the K47, which is 7.5 inch trainer. I just feel again we're just that just works on pocket awareness and then just again getting the ball out of your glove. And it's funny, I take my flat gloves to or my pancake glove to my clinics, and the girls who've never used it before, it's a huge struggle. And I always say, okay, you are going to struggle because a lot of my younger girls want to feel the ball or glove is here, and the throwing hand is just kind of hanging out. So it takes them a while, and it's crazy after doing it for I don't know 10 minutes how much quicker they're getting the ball out of their actual glove. So yeah, those two are my absolute go tos that I love to have.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know it's kind of a standard in the college baseball world, and even now, at like the higher level high school programs, to be using some kind of smaller mitt. And I know uh, in our experience at Eckerd last season and at Capital the season before, using those smaller mitts really made a difference. So just a heightened sense of pocket awareness, understanding how to kill the ball, and then also understanding, hey, that transfers quicker when you're able to use that other hand. That's really, really good.
Yeah, and I do too at my clinics. When I had a glove that I have a newer glove now, so it doesn't show, but I always love to just show in my pocket, and it's the rest of the glove is great or like nice, and then there's like at the pocket there's a black circle because I'm telling them like consistently that ball should be hitting
Mhm.
here, and when in doing so it should be deflecting in that throwing hand because it's again we don't have much time to field, squeeze, bring it up, throw. But I love to give that visual. I'm like, see right here. It's because it hits there every
That's
time.
awesome. That's awesome. So, when you're talking at these clinics, are there ever people who come up to you and say, "Hey, is there any way you can help us kind of sculpt a practice plan or something like a drill series to help our team out?"
Yes, I get that a lot. And actually, I created some practice plans back at the beginning of the year because and my channel is so many drills, how to play your position, situations. But this was something where it took me about a year to create. And with it, so I have 8U, 10U, 12U practice plans, and there's 10 in each age group.
Wow,
And then I have most drills have a 3 to 5 second video right next to it because I have the drill written out, and then I have the video because I'm a visual learner. And sometimes when you read something, you're like, I don't know. But I created those because I had such a huge demand for people saying, "Hey, I'm a dad. I've never coached before, but I'm volunteering. How do I run a practice?" And I created those, which they have been such a hit. I think people are really enjoying them and just giving them an idea. And granted, when they buy my subscription, they get 30 practice plans. But even if they just got one, I think they can see how it's broken down. You have warm up, 30 minutes infield, drills, outfield, and then you've got hitting, you got to do some live situations, base running. So,
that's awesome.
and I try and tell them too, here's an idea. Now make it how you want it. Here's some other drills you can do, but here's a good like start on how to, break down that practice
That's
plan.
awesome. I think the best kind of programs that you have access to online do allow that room for your own creativity and your own sculpting. It's a template, right? It's not. This isn't your script. This is you. This is your guidelines. Now you go have fun with it.
Right.
Man, that's awesome.
And every team too is, every team is so different that it's like, hey, if you only get through 2 infield drills, that's fine as long as you're doing it right and you're not just rushing through like, okay, I gotta do 50 drills this practice. No, I'm not. I'm very much like 3 to 4, depending on what the day is, but like focus on just a couple, especially for the younger kids, because you overwhelm them with too much information. But making sure, and this is the most important, situations. We always want to focus on the fundamentals, which is awesome. And you need to have great fundamentals. But if you don't know how to play the game, your fundamentals do you no good.
That's awesome. So when it comes to kind of implementing the situation into the fundamental learning, are there some examples of drills or practice ideas that you're able to share here that kind of mesh the two together?
With fundamentals and situations, I don't know if I honestly don't know. I don't know if I have any that kind of go hand like together.
Yeah. So I think that's an important note too. Focus on what you're focusing on, right?
Yeah.
That's a great way to go about it, because I know in the past one of the flaws that I have as a coach is I try to put all these pieces into the puzzle and hope they all go in the right place.
Right.
But simplifying the drill is so valuable. So let's dive in now just to the situation piece. Is there a certain drill series or kind of situation you like to create in a practice environment to help them really focus on that?
Yeah, and obviously it'll vary every practice, but I like to do maybe two situations of practice, and let's so say first and thirds, and that's something we're going to spend 10 to 15 minutes on, or you got runner on second base, no outs, and a lot of times I really love if I have enough girls to put actual runners because it's so hard to okay, there's runner on two, you hit it to right field, and it's, have a ghost runner, and
Yeah.
so then the girl's like, oh, I didn't know if she was going to be safe. So I love to have actual runners. If usually it's outfielders, unfortunately, but
Gotcha.
have those runners running around. But yeah, I mean, I can honestly. Did you just? I can't remember what your question. What your
You're all
question
good.
was.
You're all good. Just
Specific
breaking down
one.
situational drills, and then uh,
Okay.
let, let,
Yeah.
let's go here too. If you had to work with a high school group you've never worked with before, what do you start with? What's your first step into getting to know these kids?
Is situational situations
Yeah,
or
yeah. Just from trying to understand how much of the game they know.
I start basic runner on one, and then I'm just kind of hitting everywhere. If that looks fine, okay, I'm gonna go runner on two. Once I've hit runner on two, and then it's like okay, we're gonna go runner on first and second. Where I find so I feel like runner on one, runner on two, girls are like yeah, I got it. When you start to hit the ball in the outfield and they've got to go throw it home, cut it, that's when chaos starts to happen. So a lot of I coached a 14U team and a 16U team, but a lot of our focus was, if there's a runner on two or three, you're getting the ball in the outfield. Who's the cut?
Yeah,
Is it first base? Is it third? Is it short? Second? So, but yeah, if I'm regardless of age, I'm starting in the beginning and I'm assuming you don't know anything
yeah,
because where I got caught when I used to, or when I started coaching, I assumed my 14U girls knew almost all the situations. They knew cutoffs. And so you're going through it and you're realizing they're kind of like, looking around, I'm like, okay, no more assuming. I'm going to start fresh, and if I think we're picking it up, okay, I'll keep moving on then.
yeah. I dig it. So you kind of create a progression there, and you ramp it up as you go, as you start to recognize where they're at from a situational understanding standpoint. That's great. Is there something similar? Let's go back to fundamentals, and let's dive into something more specific like transfers. Is
Hmm.
there a drill progression for transfers that you like to use?
Um, so I like to do a lot of keeping the feet still to start.
Mhm.
So if like I'm square, the athlete's square to me, I'm just tossing them balls straight in, and they're just working. We're not even going to throw. We're just going to work here. So I might even start on our knees.
Yeah,
So they might have that valley flat glove. I'm just tossing the ball, transfer. So once they get that, they stand up, feet still, stay still. I toss it, transfer. I'm very had boring is probably not the best word to market myself, but I do the most basic types of drills. Now, depending on the kid, if they're not getting something, I might do something a little crazy for them to understand. But a lot of my drills are very boring. Like you're on your knees, I'm tossing you a ball. Let's just work transfers. Now, I might have you on your knees, and I'll roll the ball now, and you're going to transfer. So
But
My
that's
yeah,
a good thing in my experience when you start to kind of dive into the monotony of the space, because let's be honest, you and I have both kind of you know experienced that in a college setting. It does get boring. It does get like it kind of it gets a little grindy, right? But when you master that, that's when you really start to see some special growth, and I think, in my opinion, like more confidence.
yeah. Yeah, and I that's something I when I do my clinics. So my average age at clinics is like 9 to 12.
Hmm.
And we're doing dailies. I don't know, every day is where you're rolling the ball back and forth. And it's one of those, and I get it because we've been there. It's boring. You want to do all these fun things, but I always try and preach. I'm like, you want the game to be easy. Practice should be hard, grindy, just not, I shouldn't say fun, but you don't want the games is where it should be easy. So if you're doing this in practice and if you master that, then you're going to have a blast in the games. You're going to win. You don't have to think about it. So it's like one of those things I'm always trying to preach to them. Like, I get it. It's boring, but you have to do it if you want to be great. Because the great athletes are doing the boring stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Meg, thank you so much for coming on. This is awesome. I've been having a blast. Special thank you to the Baseball Blue Book. If you haven't checked out their app yet, make sure you check it out. It's free. You'll have access to recruits, coaches, events coming up in your area. If you're interested in instructors, they'll be on there too. If you need access to Meg, she'll have a section there too where you can find her social media and her website. So make sure to check that out. Also, thank you to Valley Sports for partnering with Meg and myself, allowing us to continue to promote their products and be able to use these products with our lessons and with our players that we coach. So we really appreciate it. Meg, thank you so much for the time. This has been a blast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.